and welcome to Ask the Source. I'm your host, Josh Reinstein, and we're here in a beautiful day on our rooftop studio in Jerusalem. My guest today is Jonathan Lipnick. He's the Dean of Holy Land Studies at the Israel Institute for Biblical Studies. Jonathan, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you.
Tell our viewers a little bit about what is the Israel Institute for Biblical Studies.
The Israel Institute for Biblical Studies is the premier online educational program for Israel studies, biblical Hebrew, and Holy Land studies. What that means is that from the comfort of your home, you can get in touch with a Hebrew University accredited program that will give you access to the authentic knowledge that Hebrew scholars have had concerning the Bible for centuries.
Well, it's interesting. You teach Hebrew to people at the comfort of their own homes. Why would Bible-believing Christians want to learn biblical Hebrew?
Well, 3/4 of what Christians call the Bible is actually the Old Testament, or the Hebrew Bible. And all of those books, from Genesis all the way on down to Chronicles, all of those books were originally written in Hebrew. And so when you read the Bible in translation, whether it's in English, in Spanish, in French, or in any of the ancient languages which the Bible was translated to in antiquity, what you're doing is you're removing yourself from the original by 2 or 3 or even 10 degrees of separation. And so I think it behooves any Bible-believing Christian to want to get back to the source. And Hebrew is that source. When you read the Bible in Hebrew, you're going to be hearing the words that the prophets recited in the actual language that they said it in. You're going to be hearing the words that Moses recited. You're going to be hearing the words that Abraham heard told to him by God just as they sounded to him, rather than in a newfangled distortion.
So then give us an example. Give us an example of how, by learning it in Hebrew, it would be different than learning in English, for example.
If we turn to the book of Genesis, chapter 18, a very famous story of the Lord visiting the elderly couple, Abraham and Sarah. And what's promised to Sarah is that she, at the age of 90, will give birth to a child. And her reaction, as you, I'm sure, are aware, is laughter. What ends up happening about a year later is that Sarah gives birth to a son and names him Isaac. And you probably never really considered what the relationship between those two scenes is. But when you read the Bible in Hebrew, what you find is that there's a fascinating wordplay, because the word for laughter in Hebrew is tzchok. The word for Isaac in Hebrew is yitzchak. And so really, the story displays in the original Hebrew that the circle has come to a completion. By laughing, Sarah is demonstrating that Isaac's name is becoming fulfilled. In fact, the name Isaac, or Yitzchak, even contains a bit of wordplay in it, because the sound tzchok sounds a bit like a giggle or a chortle when someone is laughing. And all of that is lost in translation. When you go back to the original Hebrew, you're getting so many more levels of meaning are coming out and sort of smacking you in the face in a way that makes the Bible alive with meaning that you never understood before.
Well, how effective is the program? Can you take someone who has no knowledge of Hebrew and get them literally speaking Hebrew or reading the Bible in Hebrew?
It's an incredibly effective and rapid process. Just by taking part in a 1-hour lesson once a week, after having learned the alphabet, you are immediately thrown into the text of the Hebrew Bible, and you can begin to read the words of the Torah, of the prophets, of the writings, right from the get-go. I think what makes our program so effective is that rather than get stuck on grammar and verb conjugations and a heavy linguistic sort of scholarly approach, from the get-go, you are actually reading the Bible and beginning to take apart the text, getting behind the translation in a way that is absolutely awe-inspiring and eye-opening.
Right now we have all these viewers who would love to learn how to speak Hebrew, but can anyone do it? Do you need any type of scholastic ability, education? You need a degree? Is it for everyone?
It's absolutely for everyone. A lot of our students are actually graduates from seminaries who've had a little bit of Hebrew, but the vast majority are absolute novices who not only have never studied Hebrew, but have no natural ability for language learning from their past instruction. And I think that what our course does really well is take you through in a very user-friendly way. Anyone with basic computer skills, anyone who uses the internet on an even irregular basis will find our method extremely user-friendly and productive.
How powerful is it to literally read the Bible in its natural language of Hebrew? How does that compare to the English version?
Opening up the Bible in English is a very, very powerful experience that can be spiritually uplifting and can also be eye-opening from a historical perspective. But at the end of the day, what you're left with is a printed page with English words on it, and you always feel at the end of that experience that there's a kind of buffer or a sort of wall, a veil that separates you from the original. When you open up the Bible in the original Hebrew and you hear the words as they sound in the original Hebrew, what you're doing is following in a tradition that is not just 2,000 years old, but goes back time immemorial to the creation of the world. The world in the book of Genesis was created not in English translation of the King James Bible, but in the words of the Hebrew Bible just as it appears today. So I would say to you, it's an incredibly powerful experience because it is unrivaled in terms of its authenticity.
Jonathan, there are literally tens of millions of people watching this show. What message do you have for our viewing audience?
So, right behind us, the city of Jerusalem, the old city where so much of our biblical history took place. I would counsel you, if this is a landscape that moves you and that your soul yearns for, I think that one of the most effective ways that you, from the comfort of your home, can get closer to the sanctity of this place is by checking out our website, the Israel Institute of Biblical Studies. Talk to one of our customer representatives and enroll yourself in one of our language courses. Learn biblical Hebrew and learn to read the Bible as it was always intended.
Thank you, Jonathan, for being on the show, and thank you for tuning in to Ask the Source. I'm your host, Josh Reinstein. Now back to the studio.